Good evening and welcome to Beyond Shakespeare. I am not Rob, as you can tell. However, I am standing in. I'm Greg. I've been doing this for far too long. Anyway, hello and welcome. Tonight is not a play. We are not looking at a dramatic text. We're looking at the next in our continuing series on civic pageantry. Very much to do with the City of London. Tonight is Christian IV of Denmark's entry or visit to the City of London in 1606. And I'm going to leave the rest to our wonderful Tracey. However, he was the brother-in-law to the then King James I or James VI of Scotland, depending on how you're looking at it. We have a very small and select group this evening to have a look at this text. We have Eric, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Eric.
Hi, I'm here. I'm not hosting tonight. Yay! Sorry, I just usually, scramble things when I'm having to host and do other stuff as well. So it's a nice break.
And we have the wonderful Tracey, who is, I can only describe her as an expert on these things. She has numerous books, which thankfully I'm in the wrong house, otherwise there would be books appearing. Most recently she's published published an edition of, and I can't remember the name of the journal, on civic pageantry and other such things. Tracey, welcome. If you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Greg and Eric. It's just us. But this is a really interesting little moment. It's one of those areas of civic pageantry where actually everyone's kind of not really paid much attention to it, and now things are coming out to the woodwork, things are being learnt about it. So it's kind of watch this space job.
So the most royal and honourable entertainment of the famous and renowned King Christian IV, King of Denmark, etc., who with a fleet of gallant ships arrived on Thursday the 16th day of July in 1606 in Tilbury-Hope near Gravesend, with relation of his meeting by our royal king, the prince and nobles of our realm, the pleasures sundry times showed for his gracious welcome, a most famous and admirable entertainment at Theobalds, with royal passage on Thursday the 31st of July through the City of London, and honourable shows there presented them, and manner of their passing, by H.R. Henry Roberts at London. Tracey, I suppose the first question is, how much do we know about Henry Roberts?
He's a printer, so it's one of those texts where the actual kind of source of it is a bit opaque. It's probably one of those situations where the printer has thought, okay, the King of Denmark was here, and that was kind of quite a big deal. So what I need to do is actually publish something about it, because people might buy it, because it's like news. So yeah, he has no formal status in relation to the events, unlike some of the other texts that were generated at the same time. So yeah, so it's, as you'll see as we go through, it's very general. It's very like, it was all fantastic, without giving too much detail. So it's kind of interesting example of that genre of like piggybacking on an event to get a text out there and hopefully make some money out of it, really. Yeah, I mean, the trip itself lasted for a couple of weeks, and they did various things. And Roberts tries to kind of encompass all of them in this little 7-page document.
What was the reason? Was there a particular reason for Christian's visit?
I think behind the scenes, it was probably as much a matter of bolstering James's position as anything else. He'd only been king for 3 years. It was the year after the Gunpowder Plot. His wife was the sister and daughter of kings of Denmark, and he kind of needed to sort of demonstrate that he was a big player in pan-European politics. So I suspect that was large part of the reason why he came over. Similarly, in 1633, I think, Marie de Medici, who was then Charles I's mother-in-law, she came over. But I think it was also probably, given that the Danish were Protestants, it was an attempt to kind of reassure the English that their new king, although his mother was Mary Queen of Scots, famously rather Catholic, was actually okay. So I'm sure there's all sorts of, behind the scenes machinations. He wasn't just like visiting his relations.
Okay. Yeah, you don't just turn up anyway, do you? Come on, let's be honest. If you're a royal, you don't just go, "Hi, thought I'd pop over." Sorry, Eric. Yes.
I was just going to ask, why is this sort of being revisited by historians now rather than why has it been sort of forgotten, so to speak, or just glossed over?
That's a really good question. I should have said. I mean, I think it's because this was news to me actually last year when I discovered that this research was going on. Matt Stegel, who's professor at Bristol, is working on the Oxford collection of the works of John Marston. And it turns out that John Marston wrote some of the pageantry for this show, which, yeah, he was a new, and I was like, Marston writing stuff? I'm like, wow, okay. Because I didn't get any Marston stuff from the City Records, but he did produce some stuff, which we'll come back to in a later session. So yeah, Matt Stegel is doing a lot of research on the events held for Christian and so on and so forth. And it's really, really interesting actually, because it's been fairly kind of left, everyone kind of knew he was here and it was like, relatively big deal, but now suddenly it's John Marston writing for the City, and it's like, wow, that's really interesting. It's mostly in Latin, which is annoying, but anyway.
Oh dear, how inconsiderate. I forgot one little bit here. Printed for HR and are to be sold by William Barley, dwelling in Gracious Street near Leadenhall Gate, 1606. If I can ask Mr. Eric to read that first passage down to ready forever to be commanded.
I am indeed ready forever to be commanded. To the right and worshipful and to the right worshipful and most worthy favourer of all virtues, Sir Thomas Smith, Knight, all increase of worship in this life and after death joys eternal. Right worshipful, as I was in the time of your worshipful father for many favours bounden, so have I ever devoted myself in all my ability to your worship and all the rest of his worshipful progeny. Amongst all which yourself, whose virtues God hath regarded, and the prince most worthily respected, I have in my chiefest thoughts sought to acknowledge my duty and to manifest my zeal to that worshipful house from whence you proceed. And albeit to mine own knowledge, you have been a spectator of those things wherewith I now make bold to present you. Yet thereby I have thought to manifest my love and humbly beseech you that you vouchsafe the acceptance thereof. The rather, for that it concerneth the honours done by our king unto his most dear beloved brother, all which yourself being better acquainted with than many others, that by fostering it your honoured name shall be had in acceptance with many thousands of his realm, whose dues, I'm guessing, desues, I'm not entirely sure what word that is, are great, to hear the truth of all these honourable entertainments given and received. Thus humbly commending myself unto your worship's favour and humbly craving pardon for my presumption, I cease from your further trouble and rest in all humble duty at your service. Ready forever to be commanded, Henry Roberts.
Unless who was Thomas Smith?
I think, the really famous Thomas Smith was the guy who was the guy who set up the Virginia Company. Very well known for that. Big wheel in city circles, but it's not that uncommon a name. So I'm not 100% sure if it's that one. It might well be that one because he was in favour with James, so it would kind of make sense.
As you said, Tracy, grovel, and more grovel.
Worshipful. He's obviously hoping he's going to get some more patch.
Yeah, just how many times did he say worshipful? It's like there are other words you could have used there, dude. But I mean, they didn't exactly have thesauruses, I think.
Yeah, no, but it's the usual, I suppose, it's the usual commission, what do you call it? Introductory passage, isn't it? If you're going to print something, you give praise to whoever it is that you're going to give praise to. Can't think of anything else on that bit. Go on, Eric.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's kind of funny how he goes. I will present you the events that you went to. You could actually you've actually seen these things. You have been a spectator of those things. Wherewith I now make bold to present you. It's like, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there's no guarantees he himself actually witnessed all of it, because he's more than slightly vague about a lot of it. It's like, oh yeah, it was really amazing. Things happened and everyone loved it. There's no way he would have been at Greenwich and at Tibbles and everywhere else. There's no way. So this is all sort of second or third hand.
Yeah. No. Whereabouts was, for those who may not know the area, whereabouts is wherever this was? I've just completely forgotten. Yeah, where was this taking place?
Well, it was basically a sort of Trace Christian stay. So it's from when he arrived in London, well, at Gravesend. Then went from there to Greenwich, which is where Queen Anna had her court. Obviously, kind of caught up with these big sis, like to do, or little sis, I think possibly. And then they went off to Tibbles, which is how they pronounced Theobalds in those days, and which was one of James's favourite places. Actually, it was William Cecil's house, so it was like very close to the centre of power. And I think James died there actually, but he really loved it. It was up on the edge of Hertfordshire. So not that far, sort of past keep going.
Yeah, not far at all.
And then towards the end of his trip, he had the formal entry through the City of London, which is the bit that I'm obviously most interested in.
Yeah, who cares about Tibbles? Sounds like somebody's cat, to be honest. Sorry. Oh dear. Okay. So I was trying to think where to stop us after the next section. If I can get Tracey, if you're happy to read, since there's so few of us, if I can get you to read, and I'll stop you at some point because I'm not entirely certain where to stop now at the moment.
Okay. Okay. The royal, rare, and most honourable entertainment of the famous King Christian IV, King of Denmark, etc., since his first arrival on shore the 17th day of July 1606. When it pleased God to place the imperial crown, this most blessed and famous kingdom, on the head of our most glorious and renowned sovereign, King James, it was not a little admired amongst the commons of this land, the honours done his highness by most Christian kings and princes, who by their ambassadors, as from France, Spain, Italy, Denmark, Holland, and others, not only presented their honourable loves and joy for his happiness therein, but desiring peace with his people and state, with love in all honour to be continued amongst them and their nations. Their honourable and Christian request, his highness with all honour embraced, with such kingly conditions, love and fame to him and his subjects, as all the kings and potentates of the world may admire, and his only people joy in such honoured peace. For thereby have our merchants sure and safe traffic to all nations, and they to our land, where they trade at their pleasures. Since when diverse nations, which with good regard of these blessings God hath endued this realm with all, and the troubles of their own countries, preferring their quiet above their native country, wealth and friends, have left their homeborn regions and placed themselves here with their families, with their families, where they live free from those dangers they were subject unto under the government of the most religious and honourable king, enjoying their wealth without fear and resting in all tranquillity of mind and security of their estates. Praise God for his excellent majesty that so carefully tenders their lives and safeties as his own peoples.
Ding! It was a good place to stop since it's...
Ding!
Yeah.
Yeah, I was over ding. It's like all words.
It's all right. I just thought that was quite a nice place to stop with a tendereth lives and safety. Anything particular in that passage? I didn't see anything I particularly thought, oh, again, very nice about the king.
I think there is a certain amount of establishing James as a monarch within other European monarchs, definitely. Because Scotland was a minor kingdom, in many respects, and his route to the throne of England was slightly skewy, really. So yeah, there's an element of that, definitely.
Yes. Right. Right, I'll go down. Peace and all happy tranquility, with so many countries being established, and His Majesty enjoying the blessing of the Most High God that placed him. Ambassadors from state to state oftentimes passed, whereby the kings from far received joyful tidings of his royal government, health, and welfare, and His Majesty likewise from them and their kingdoms. The affinity of blood and desire of true brotherly love to be continued, which love is the true lodestone that draweth friends and moveth the heart to desire the company, which they most honour and esteem oft, as we have read many famous examples of all estates, as well princes as others. But in man's memory have not been heard, nor hearing, with more rejoicing seen, so rare and almost excellent a sympathy of true and honourable love, as is most apparent by that most royal King Christian of Denmark, who nothing regarding the dangers of the seas, nor any other accidents, albeit he did oftentimes hear of the gracious and happy estates of our dread sovereign King James, his royal and most esteemed princely sister Queen Anne, Prince Henry, and their royal issue, that such is his great desire and kingly affection that no report whatsoever could satisfy his kingly mind, but in person adventured to be partaker of their most royal presence, and to participate with them and their majesty called majestical companies, wherein no doubt a most honourable and true combined royal mind is expressed. I will stop there, because there's one thing that really interests me, and that is that there was a very good program on recently on BBC, on BBC, I think it was, about witchcraft, and it was talking about the witches that supposedly marred Anne's original passage to England. And I just thought that was quite an interesting little thing of the dangers of the seas.
That's one sentence you just read, you know that?
Sorry?
That's just one sentence.
Was it? All right.
Yeah, it was just one sentence. It went on and on and on and on. Yeah, I mean, he could have said that, like, basically, you know, Christian was desperate to see his sister and to kind of put his imprimatur on his brother-in-law, and he, in just of that, he faced the dangers of the sea. Yeah, this is just verbiage, really, isn't it?
Yes, it was a nice way of saying Christian just wanted to come over, really, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was really. Yeah.
Because everything was beautiful and sort of going well in Scotland and England, so they've decided to come over to see how to partake in their most royal presence.
Let's go. Where are we going down to? Do you want to go from which honourable intention to the end of his pages paragraph, Eric?
For which honourable intention his ships of great strength were prepared in 2 pinnaces. The admiral, wherein his own person came, being a most huge ship, is esteemed of 1,500 tons, which ship is so adorned with rich gold and very excellent workmanship, as many thousands, upon report thereof, of purpose have gone to Gravesend, where she doth bide to view her. Besides the beauty and riches of this great ship, she is appointed with most huge ordnance, men and victuals, fit for so kingly a presence. The rest likewise accordingly complete, all rich in ordnance, men, and munition. The kingly attendants of his person and all others of his train, furnished in apparel very rich and most beautiful, everyone his estate and place, in his estate and place. His council and chiefmen, very decent after their country fashion, richly decked in silk with gold and silver lace, jewels and chains of rare estimation. His pages and guard of his person in blue velvet, laid with silver lace for their best suit, and one suit for the exchange of other silk, with whitish colored hats with bands embroidered, most of them either blue or white stockings, his trumpeters in white satin doublets, blue velvet hose trimmed with silk and silver lace, watch cloaks guarded with sundry colors, and white hats with blue silk and gold bands embroidered. His common guard of soldiers with muskets furnished, very rich, white fustian doublets, watched hose with white and blue lace, Loose cassocks, large and fair, like our footmen's coats, with white and blue lace. Hats with bands suited alike, and all his common soldiers in cassocks and hose of watched color. The master and his mates, gunners, and chief officers being very rich in their apparel, his trunks and other provision for carriage, covered with red velvet, trimmed with blue silk and gold lace, his sumpter clothes and coverings to cover his ladings of red velvet with blue silk and gold lace, all made after the English fashion. I'm not entirely sure why.
I loved that. Great description. If nothing else.
I'm kind of wondering if this guy's a haberdasher or something, because he's really into fabric, isn't he?
Oh, he loves his fabrics, doesn't he? It's not often you get a description where you could really imagine what they look like like that. No, it's all very nice, and it's very, very, as you'd expect, very sort of high quality stuff. Lots of velvet and lace. Yeah, I mean, you don't often get velvet hose. Must be a bit warm in July, I would have thought, actually. Yeah. Actually, put cassocks. Cassocks, those great big coats with the buttons down the front and on the sleeves. Really hot. But yeah.
They were coming from Denmark. It would have been fine.
It looked good. That's the main thing, isn't it? Really.
I'm actually quite interested because I'm going, what were the English wearing? Oh, good. Because I'm just like, if we've got that description of the Christians lot, I'm like, well, all right. What were we wearing?
Nice things, even nicer things.
Yeah, of course.
Clearly also, if all this is accurate, as we were discussing, because we don't know if he was there, but like if all this is accurate, it just seems like basically Christian was kind of showing off as well, aside from making a demonstration of wealth. It was also a demonstration of power.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No expense spared. Even the soldiers are wearing, velvet hose with gold lace and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a lovely. I was quite taken with that description. Somebody said last night, you sort of where's Ben Jonson when you need someone to describe who's wearing what, and I was thinking, all I could think of was that when we were reading that.
Yeah, it's like the not Inigo Montoya, or what was I saying? Yeah, anyway.
Inigo Jones.
Yeah, Inigo Jones. Inigo Montoya is a completely different person.
Or Thomas Hardy, if you're looking a little later on for description. Yeah, so yes, interesting section. Where should we go to? Tracey, do you want to read, or are you enjoying your food?
Fine, I'll carry on. It's kind of quite funny, actually.
I'm sort of debating whether or not you'd start with start from the government of his followers, and either probably go to the end of "and by God's providence" bit, because that seems like the next good chunk. Get him to Gravesend.
Okay, fine. Okay. So for the government of his followers of all sorts, according to his kingly pleasure, he ordained a marshal, who had under marshals many, with great charge from his majesty, that any man of his company should be drunk, or otherwise to abuse himself in any manner towards Englishmen or his own followers, to be punished sharply. Such is the royal care and honour of his excellency, which is duly executed. All things being ready for the voyage with great care, which with great care of all his officers was accomplished, after a most honourable order taken for government of the kingdom in his absence, the wind serving fitly, and heavy parting of the queen, his honoured and most gracious mother, with the states and chief of the land, with tears of sorrow plentifully shed of his loving subjects, and their hearty prayers zealously made to God, the prosperous success of his majesty at sea, and happy arrival to his desirous port, he bade them all farewell, leaving them to their charge, and betook his royal person to the mercy of God, that guideth heaven and earth and seas, and in all dangers protecteth his people. And by God's providence he sendeth winds at his pleasure, after some more than ordinary something of his dread sovereign and people coming, the royal fleet had sight of something, and in safety, something, this is all very scrappy, this, but beholding and with great pleasure admiring the sweet and pleasant land, something of the land, not desiring to something, he's an excellent person, until the King's Majesty, our sovereign, came. So I think that basically is saying that he was kind of really keen to arrive. But applied with his shipping so high as Tilbury-Hope, I rode some 2 or 3 miles distant from Gravesend, a port town in the county of Kent, where some small way off the road, more near the town, they came to anchor, whereof our gracious king, being by post advertisers having his barges ready, would being a king replenished with all kingly courtesy, well considering of these great travels, this kingly brother had undergone to see his highness the queen and their honourable progeny without long stay, this mirror of all honour, King James, accompanied with the prince, his council, and many of the nobility of the land, great store of courtiers who gave their attendance and took their barges towards Tilbury, where the king and his ship attended his kingly company. The Denmark was looking earnestly now for the coming of the king with his company.
He's here. He's here. Yes, we apologise. There are some wonderful spaces in this text, which have got some rather wonderful symbols in our passages. So we apologise. Yes, I love that bit about the marshal, which Tracey was right. Commenting on. Trust me to choose the wrong moment there.
To mention that unless it's likely to happen, are you? Just watch out that you don't get drunk and abuse the English, because that would be
Yeah, that would totally not happen. They just have to be in
No, and equally, the English were famously very tolerant of foreigners in this period as well. Very tolerant.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No riots, no dissent, no nothing. No, they were lovely to them.
No, there's no famous speeches in any plays about refugees, are there? No.
Any place that aren't by you know who. No, indeed.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
I just like after that whole description of the fashion, what they were wearing, you find out that this is meant to be like set in Denmark before they actually leave, and you're like, how on earth do you know this? You weren't there, dude. I mean, like maybe you were in London when they arrived, but surely they were.
We can happily assume that it was all amazing and wonderful, and everyone was very, very upset that he might not come back, and everything was great, kind of thing.
I did like the detail about the mother and the sort of crying.
It sounded like a speech from so many plays. Oh, the mother was weeping.
Her tears are sort of plentifully shed of his loving subjects. Well, they were probably worried. Maybe not. And do we know if King Christian IV was a good king or not? I mean, as in sort of admired or respected, or
there were wars on and off with Sweden, possibly Norway. But yeah, I mean, it was a very well-established monarchy, so yeah. And they were Protestants, which is quite important. Very important.
Especially at this point.
Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. You were saying earlier, I hadn't quite occurred to me just how close we are to the gunpowder plot here. And it's like, oh yes, of course. That was very, very close to this point. It's the detail. Yes, all right. They weren't there in Denmark, but it's still wonderful to get some really nice details.
If you look at the state papers in July 1606, when they're not worrying about how they're going to entertain King Christian, they're worrying about how they're going to mop up the remaining conspirators after the gunpowder plot. So it was still a real biggie.
Yes, of course, because when were they executed? It's this year. It's 1606, isn't it? They're executed. Yeah. So
They obviously started the tradition of kind of celebrating the king's deliverance from the plotters that year.
And long may it continue. And of course, Christian would have been very happy about that. And his poor sister. Right, let's go for a little bit longer. When they came south, I think you're right, actually, Eric. When they came south with the town's end at Gravesend, they from the ships descried the barges and gave notice thereof to the king, and presently at the command of the Lord Admiral of the fleet, the company was by the boatswain's whistles called up, and in all the gallant manner that might be, each man in his livery, making a gallant show and noise of trumpets, after the sea manner, and meeting of friends, the tacklings, tops, and every part of the ship was so replenished with men that hardly might you deserve the ropes or see the ship's sides. The king, arriving at the ship's side, was entertained most graciously by the Denmark king to his ship, with the prince, nobles, and gentlemen of his train, which by King James, the prince and nobles, was again requited with kingly embracings and most honourable entertainment to this country. Like honourable favours and great welcomes were made his followers by the Council of England, and question mark that word, to the great joy of all the beholders, one house and something being spent with great delight aboard the ship. These famous kings joyed in each other's company, the tide serving, they set forward to the court. I'm going to stop there. And interesting, and I'm now going to think where was it? Sorry, there was after the sea trumpets, after the sea manner. I vaguely think the last time we read something similar, we had a reference to sea trumpets. Or something similar, or maybe it was sea thunder. Anyway, we've had many comments. We've had many such things over the last few years at sea. Previous videos on Beyond Shakespeare for all of the Lord Mayor shows that are extant for this period, and a few other shows of similar nature that we have recorded with Beyond, much more ably hosted by Rob.
Well, you're doing okay.
I love that. I mean, it's again, I can't see that this person was there. He was probably watching from the shore, hoping no one drowned, to be brutally honest. Tracey, any thoughts?
I don't think he was anywhere near it, I suspect. Because you think about, he was graciously greeted. I mean, it's all very, very, very general, and none of it is the slightest bit surprising. So I think it's probably not until they get to Greenwich when things start getting a bit more specific.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice, nice to have trumpets, obviously, it's always good.
I was actually intrigued by the fact that they stayed on the ship and went to the court by boat. I didn't know this was possible at the time, but apparently it was. So would it be like sort of going upriver kind of thing?
Yeah, they went upriver to Greenwich. Yeah.
Cool.
And then from there, they went across to the tower and disembarked the tower, which is the next bit. But
Would that have been safer then, or just like sort of prettier, like the scenic tour of?
I mean, the river was very navigable, so it wouldn't have, been an issue. Obviously, you'd have to kind of make sure they didn't bump into any merchant ships and stuff. But yeah. Once you pass Greenwich, you're past the Pool of London, so the river gets a bit narrower.
Yes. I so wish I got one of Rob's maps, but hey, if I'd have thought about it, I'd a nice little tube map with the places they visit, but didn't get there. But again, there are various videos, and I'm sure there are various ways in which you can find the route and see where the our royal passage continued. I love the noise. You can hear the noise in that passage too. I think you can actually hear what was happening. It's a very oral. We having had the very visual description, we've now had a very oral description of what you'd have heard in a rather wonderful way. Tracey, can I get you to read from the two kings and the prince in his barge down to the end of the being now on our English land?
Okay. The two kings and the prince in his barge were placed, and the noblemen of England courteously entertained into their companies the noblemen and the best of King Denmark's train. Barges falling off from the ship after they'd rowed some small way, the admiral discharged a thundering peal of ordnance, whereof many are cannons of brass, as the smoke dimmed the skies. The noise was heard a far way off. After her, the vice and rear admiral, and so all the rest, which made a long peal, every ship taking his turn very orderly and exceeding good sort. By this time they came to the blockhouses situate near Gravesend, who followed in discharging their ordnance in like manner, with such industry and care as was very well commended and highly praised for both kings and their companies. This honourably welcome, given and received, they passed the river till they come to Greenwich, where the royal courts of England lay. All the way passing, the royal king of Denmark, with many loving favours, showed his heart's joy in embracing an noble and most honourable Prince Henry. Being now on our English land, a more kind welcome was again begun to all the strangers. To behold the multitudes of people which came to see them was admirable, especially having so small knowledge of the king's arrival.
So, for those who may not be as astute on English history, Prince Henry would have been king had he not died at an unfortunately young age, and so Charles was never meant to be king, really. And yeah, Tracey said exactly what I was thinking at that point. Yeah, it's quite an interesting one.
That's one of the counter kind of historical questions that I think is actually an interesting one. You know, what would have happened if Henry hadn't died young? You know, we would have had the Civil War period, we would have had the English Revolution, and we've had, you know, I mean, who knows really? Maybe it would have made much difference in the end, but I'm sure he wouldn't have been quite so much of a complete and utter car crash as his brother.
Yeah, no, yes, read up if you're interested in Prince Henry, the king who would have been. No, that's yes, you say.
Young then, because this is 6 years before he died, so he would have been a small child.
So Charles wouldn't even have been on the scene by then, would he?
No, he was born. He would have been very, very young.
Very, yeah, I was going to say.
Elizabeth is older, but yeah, they would. You know, James turned up with an ready supply of children. Unlike Elizabeth.
That's always convenient. Look, I have heirs.
The daughters, you know, can't go wrong, really.
Oh, heir and a spare, which is thankful.
But there is how do you call it? Aside from the sort of, you know, how bad Charles was and stuff, his own during his own reign, there are lots of things dedicated to Prince Henry, and I seem to remember reading what's it called? It was the intro to a masque written by Ben Jonson, and it was the Masque of Queens, which we've not done yet. I think we've not read it yet. Possibly. Rob could correct me on this, but yeah, it's sort of dedicated to sort of the joys of you know, nobility and young Henry and all to make, because they were sort of, Johnson must have been in favor, as far as I understand it, with Henry, not so much with the king. But well, I don't know if he was ever actually in favor with the king. But yeah.
Well, if you remember, the 1624 Lord Mayor show is one that Webster did. Henry was one of the kind of the figurehead of the main sort of final pageant of that show, and Webster wrote. Who else did? But Webster wrote one of, I think it might have been Milton, but kind of, you know, verses bemoaning the loss of Henry. So it was a real biggie.
Oh God, it was,
Yeah.
Yeah. Sad. I've completely lost who's reading it, so we're just gonna pluck at random. I know it was Tracey you read just then, so
I did like, sorry, I was just going to say, I did like
Sorry,
to behold the multitudes of people having so small knowledge of the king's arrival, because they would totally not advertise that at all, that, you know, the king's brother-in-law would be coming to the country.
Yeah, I'm curious as that, but that line was such a throwaway line. But actually, you think, well, did, surely they'd have rented a crowd, if nothing else.
Also, at the same time, they're all absolutely beside themselves with joy to see him. So, you know.
I want to know where they're throwing gifts, but you know,
we could. Those things were true. Who knows? Anyway, they've got to Greenwich now. That's something.
Hey, we've got them on their way. Eric, can you read from In Royal Manor down to? Oh, we'll go for the end of the time of dinner being come.
In royal manner, they entered the court of Greenwich, where our gracious Queen Anne lay, unto whom you need not doubt, but this happy tidings and kingly brothers' company was most pleasing and joyful. Right, and as appeared at their most royal and kingly meeting of these most great princes, brother and sister, whose travels he holdeth for pleasure, and therein take great comfort, enjoying the sight and welfare of so high and mighty a princess, his dear sister Anne, Queen Anne, and did so toward and happy
issue of their loins.
Yeah, and so toward and happy issue of their loins as were present, that in that them and their presence to no monarch of the earth might think more happier contentment. This night being Friday night, and the 7th day of July, so that's today, the royal kings reposed themselves in the court, although that must be 17th day of July, I'm guessing. This night being Friday, this night being Friday at night, and the 17th day of July, I think, must have been, the royal kings reposed themselves in the court, and Saturday all day and night, when with great welcomes and joy for either of them. On Sunday, the 19th day, King James, accompanied with his brother of Denmark and nobility of both kingdoms, very rich in their court-like attire. The king, being in English fashion, went to the chapel where they heard a learned sermon preached by the Reverend Father, the Bishop of Rochester. By all the way, as they passed and returned, the royal king with admiration gave great and honorable regard to the multitude of people there present, the honorable state and gallant managing of the nobility and courtiers, with the rare company of gentlemen pensioners, and the guard in their rich coats, as he wondered highly at their rare and most high service and sumptuous attendance. The time of dinner being come, the guard of our king appointed to give their attendance on the gentleman sower carried up his kingly wands, where it wanted not anything that could possibly be gotten, with wine and beer plentiful, all served up in most honorable manner, with noise and excellent music of drums and trumpets, which moved his highness to much delight.
And for those who may not know, Greenwich Palace was roughly where the Royal Observatory and Hospital is now in Greenwich, and very much a palace with royal precedent. I do wish they'd told us what they had for dinner, but unless I've missed something in the next section, I kind of wish the menu was here. Sorry, food. Don't care what they're wearing. Just want to know what they're eating.
It would have been the most extraordinary spread.
Oh, marchpane
no
united.
No vegetables, just like meat and more meat and more meat and more meat.
Probably some very impressive symbol of Denmark in marchpane.
Yeah, no.
It's sad because I thought we'd almost hit that we were actually reading it on the day it happened, but not quite. We were about
it's a shame.
Not quite. But I can imagine. No, it's all right. I was about to say I don't think it said in the next section. I can imagine there must have been some sort of play or presentation at this point.
Yeah, they almost definitely would have been. I don't think anything survived from that. What we've got is the verses that were declaimed at Theobalds, and then obviously in the city. Yeah, which is something, but
it's better than now.
I mean, I don't know, it might be in state papers. I don't know, but I haven't looked at that. So yeah, possibly. Try and find out. If you come back to this one, I'll try and find out between now.
I want to be here for everything on this. I'm finding this really interesting. I'm just loving this reliably unreliable witness at the moment, I think.
I'm just wondering about the pensioners and their guard and their rich coats. Like, did pensioner mean the same thing as it means now, or obviously the meaning has changed, right? Sort of.
It just meant somebody who had kind of a pension, so someone who was kind of given a sum of money to live on if they were no longer able to kind of. I mean, John Stowe was given a pension by the merchant tailors, and by James actually very late in life. Yeah, I mean the Chelsea pensioners still exist as a kind of a thing. So it's that kind of concept, really. They're also a kind of walking, talking embodiment of sort of charity and benevolence as well.
Yeah.
And have the
Hence
most
the rare
wonderful
company.
outfits. And have the most wonderful outfits. Yeah. Yes. Reverend, I love the fact that, of course, the sermon was very endearing. It was very much important, and yeah, no, interesting. And I've just thought, where did we finish? No, we fit. All right, yeah, it's fine. Forgotten. Anybody else for anything else before I carry on? This mirror of esteemed grace and honour King James, the glory of all Christendom, for receiving foreign estates, so to entertain this puissant king his brother, in person accompanying him, in all royal pleasures delighting him, and most plentifully feasting him, as shall never be raised out of memory so long as the world shall have any being. But the chronicles of these two united and famous nations, and famous nations, to the end of all ages ensuing, shall record the honours given and received between these two most famous and royal brothers, kings of England and Denmark. The dinner finished, and the first Sunday after his coming to the court, innumerable was the numbers of citizens of London, as well as of the better sort and gentry, as the commons and other adjoining parishes and towns, which flocked there to see the persons of these two beloved and famous kings, the sight of which people might cause the greatest prince in the world to admire them, and in their admiration to rejoice in so fair and pleasant a sight of so many well-demeaned people, but more in the true loves to them, both which was the cause of their coming hither. This Sunday spent in God's praises and their comfort. On Monday in the forenoon, being the 20th of July, these gracious kings, accompanied with our royal prince and many honourable persons most richly mounted, on steeds of great prize and furniture fair, hunted in the park at Greenwich, and killed 2 bucks. Afternoon, the high estates went to Eltham, a house of his majesty, some 2 miles distant from the court, where in the park they hunted with great pleasure and killed 3 bucks on horseback, being followed with many companies of people which in their loves came to see them, whereof a great many not used to follow such pleasures as hunting, especially being on foot, thought not on their pains, but in the joys of their hearts, which no doubt was pleasing unto them. They endeavoured with all their power to follow after their horses, as never wearied in the view of so royal company, thinking themselves most happy of many other, to behold so rare and excellent a sight. 2 kings and a prince, and surely in the opinion of the many, their royal persons might take great pleasure to hear their continual cries to God for his blessing, and to preserve them their states and dignities from all malice and traitors' practices forever. Don't know what they mean. The sun growing nearer to his place of rest, their pleasures finished, and they returned themselves to the court, all the way pacing easily, that the people might the better obtain their desires in beholding of them. Eltham is somewhere you can actually still visit. It's been slightly done up in the 1930s, but it's still very much a place of quite some interest. I like that description, especially the last bit where it says, "Oh, they lessen their speed so that people could see them."
James did love a hunt, so
it's interesting that I actually isn't that rare. I don't think that I love the fact that you actually say 2 bucks were killed, 3 bucks were killed.
yeah.
There is a definite, the pride in that is very obvious at that point.
Even if the buck's already dead and hidden behind a bush, someone brought them and go, look, my liege.
Oh, you cynic. Also, of course, that wonderful veiled reference to the gunpowder plot.
Yeah.
That's all cool. That's nice. They're still, hanging out in South London like you do.
Someone does.
Well, needs must. Then I think they head off. They bypass London briefly, and then they go to Theobalds, and then they're back in London, proper London.
Sorry, I still can't get over the fact that's how you pronounce it. I like that. I think it's because Tracey's a great cat lover, to be honest. But
Yeah.
Right. Oh, we got. You're the only person with cats tonight, Tracey. We had.
I am, and there's nowhere to be seen. So there you go.
Yes. Any other thoughts on that bit?
Not really.
Was it usual for kings or or people, royal persons to be followed around by sort of random people when they went hunting? Because I mean, obviously they would have their entourage and stuff.
Yeah.
But was it common to sort of have the commoners?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Roberts, or whoever it is that actually wrote this, wants to emphasize that everybody wanted to see the kings. But yeah, I think so. I mean, even now, catch sight of one of the royals is kind of a big deal. I used to live near Windsor Park, and we used to go out there on a Sunday just hoping they'd catch sight of one of them.
Yeah,
and often did. So yeah.
Okay, let's try these. Tracey, if I think that's your next. If you want to go from the first day's pleasure down to the end of the before these royal persons came.
Okay. This first day's pleasure with great delight finished, they reposed themselves till Thursday, 24th of July, at which time, the morning being fair, every man his place gave their attendance. The barges waited for their majesties, which about 10 of the clock came abroad then, accompanied with his brother the king and prince, and were rowed to Blackwall, where the coaches with their train attended their coming, with such multitudes of people was not to be numbered. At the landing there of his highness, the merchant ship which anchored in the road, these discharged such a peal of ordnance as gave great contentment to that royal company. From thence they set forwards that way that leadeth to Stratford, and so to Theobalds, 12 miles distant from London, a famous and most delightful house of the Right Honourable Earl of Salisbury. All the way met with a great company of people, which saluted them and prayed for their happiness, most especially until they came 3 or 4 miles from London, all which way was so replenished of men and women of good sort, some on foot, some on horseback, some in coaches. There was hardly any way left for the royal company to pass them, such as the love of this nation to the king and his lovers and friends. And in their love, their desire so great to behold their delights, that no pain whatsoever they esteemed, but as pleasure to enjoy it, especially to behold so honourable and heavenly sight, 2 anointed kings, and so royal a prince, whom God in his great mercy evermore preserve and keep from all traitorous practices and other evils. Amen. Anyway, before these royal persons came near the house of Theobalds, there was strewed in the highways abundance of leaves, coloured green, cut like oaken leaves, on every one of which was written in large Roman letters of gold, "Welcome, welcome," which being presented to their majesties, they praised the device and found their welcomes as great to them and theirs as was spoken of.
I like that. I like the leaves. That's good. Blackwall is still South London, East London, isn't it? I'm not out towards East.
Sorry? So, where the Blackwall Tunnel is now is opposite Rotherhithe. on the north side of the river. Yeah. Obviously, when this is Stratford, obviously it means Stratford. No, it means Stratford in Warwickshire. That would be
yeah, they got slightly lost.
They're heading east and going north from there. So yeah, they got a bit lost in top of Stratford. God help them.
Yeah, and there was no Olympic Park. Yes, yeah.
As for these leaves, like this is I've never seen anything like this before. I don't know. Maybe they did that. I don't know if there's abundance of them, or maybe there was just a few. I don't know. It's a nice idea.
It's one of those. It's so. Oh no, what's the word? So incidental. It probably is true. It just feels like one of those lovely little details that. Yeah, I can't see there being that many though.
Well, it depends. It could be sort of like the equivalent of the palm tree leaves on, like in the Bible and stuff. Sort of, the whole joy. Because Tracey was talking about how the one king was of a Catholic background and sort of raising, and then if they could, and the king of Denmark would have been Protestant. Therefore, if they could agree on something religious, remotely religious, maybe they could just sort of like the symbolism or something. I don't know. Or it was just that they hadn't swept the street.
It was left over from the last one. I quite like the idea. I love the fact also that it does specify what time at the early part of that. It's also any time of day, 10 o'clock. The important info. Oh dear. Any other thoughts? I'm just. Eric, do you want to go from at this most beautiful house down to go to the end of this, the house being 12 miles off from the city?
At this most beautiful house, after their welcomes being given by this most bountiful Earl, patron of that famous place, they spent their times 4 nights and days, where they received many great delights in hunting the chases and parks near adjoining, where they killed a store of deer with great pleasure. Some other times they spent in viewing the admirable pleasures that place afforded, beholding in great delight the sweet groves, gardens, and walks with which with such rare workmanship is so beautified, and for variety so exceedeth that time stealeth too fast away for the beholders, especially where judicial eyes doth take pleasures therein. So rich, rare, and of such exquisite perfection is that place that a man may fail in describing the same, but cannot suddenly be wearied with many times viewing and reviewing thereof. On Sunday they rest from their pleasures, giving the honor of that day to him that sanctified the same, and hearing learned sermons. Amongst all the things which was to be noted at this honorable place during these 2 royal kings' stay there, this I may not outpass. The house being 12 miles off from the city of London, notwithstanding the distance of the places, the great abundance of people which came from London to see these 2 royal kings and prince, were so many that a man may wonder at, but certainly not repulsed. Not sure. The highways thither, day nor night, never free from multitudes of people, going and coming in such great companies that all the towns and villages adjoining were so replenished with people that there was not lodging to be had for many comers thither, not victuals for their monies, where many good sort complained, and might have fasted had they not been provided for it in that honorable house. Such was the bounty of this noble Earl in his large such was the bounty of this noble Earl in his large allowance. Sorry, I keep thinking abundance. To all officers for that time, that beef, bread, beer, wine, and other viands were not denied to any that were either acquainted in the house with the officers, or any of their friends which would seek it, as many sound to their great comfort and honor of the honorable patron of the house.
Just nice description.
You'll be amused, but probably not surprised to hear that James liked Tibbles so much he basically took it off Cecil. Now.
Mine now.
Mine now.
Wolsey and Henry again. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like happened that one in Suffolk that I can't remember what it's called now, but yeah, there was something similar. Yeah.
I guess yeah. It's okay, just like most things, if you enjoy it, take it off. You know, you don't let your subjects enjoy the best house.
According to John Harrington, who's a massive gossip, both monarchs were notoriously heavy drinkers, and the occasion was simply an orgy of drunkenness. As few English or Danish courtiers had the ruler's capacity to hold their drink. The Masque of Solomon and Sheba, which is what Johnson wrote for the occasion, descended into a farce, as most of the players were too inebriated from middle lines or even stand up. It cost Cecil well over £1,000 to put the whole thing on. However, we have to treat what Harrington says a bit of pinch of salt. But yeah, basically the following year, James just kind of went, "Oh, I'll just have this house because it's kind of nice."
Yes. And what a name to get, Johnson. I mean, although he was writing masks by this point, I suppose. Yeah. But yes, you don't just get any old playwright.
Yeah, and Inigo Jones was involved as well, so he got the A team. Definitely.
What more need more we say?
Clearly, Roberts had absolutely nothing to do with that, so he doesn't even mention it. He says that there are other things that happened while they were there.
Keep an eye out, ear out, whatever you want to call it, to this channel, because things may be appearing at some point in the future of more of the entertainments at Tilbury-Hope. And if I have anything to do with it anyway. Unfortunately, Tilbury-Hope, whatever it's called, does not exist anymore in the form that they would have known it at the time. There's, I think, one wall of the palace left. But you can imagine where they would have housed it, because the land still exists as a property. Yeah, it's interesting. It's there's a lot of stuff that's almost what do you call it? Conspicuous by its absence, as you say, Tracy. Things that this gentleman misses out because he wasn't directly involved. Anyway, I'm talking too much.
Well, also, it's kind of like, I like how he's kind of like, oh yes, the noble earl in his large allowance to all officers at that time is kind of like, well, if you're going to host the king and another king, you're probably going to show off, and you probably have a lot of money by this point. Otherwise, it kind of, I don't know, it just seems a bit like you wouldn't be that stingy, would you? And just kind of, like, it's like that public debt, which could have been public debt, is basically shouldered by Cecil.
Again, I so wish to know what they ate. Anyway, something else I saw. Anyway, right, I'll carry on a little bit. The 4 days appointed for the stay of this royal company there brought to end with many delights and pleasure, to God's glory and their graces' good contentment. On Monday, being the 28th of July, after dinner, they leave that place, returning gracious thanks to this worthy earl for their cheer and pleasures, which, being truly considered of, may deservedly be spoken of in all honour in the courts of the mightiest potentates even, as the strangers, partakers of both pleasures and cheer, to their great honour doth applaud and forever will commend in all places the renowned earl and his most kind and royal entertainment they received at this famous house of Tilbury-Hope by his
bounty.
Bounty, thank you. That
Mhm.
really through me. The same night they returned again to Blackwall, and from thence to Greenwich, where our gracious Queen Anne, the heart's delight of these two royal kings, kept her court, unto whose gracious and most loving company they were welcome, where, to the protection of God, of all glory and peace, we leave them, whoever defend them and all theirs. Thus have I brought to the end the first welcome and arrival of this famous stranger king, with his beginning of progress to God's glory, their great pleasure and content of many thousands whose desires were enriched with beholding their persons. At this place of Greenwich they reposed themselves until Thursday, which was the 31st of July, and the day appointed for their coming through the city, where they spent the time in solacing themselves with her gracious majesty, the prince and nobles of his court. I find it interesting that Anne didn't go with them.
She usually didn't. She kept her own separate court very much. Did her own thing. I don't blame her, really.
Yeah, I was gonna say, would you?
Yeah.
If you were invited.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
no.
brother and my husband going off to get absolutely rat-arsed in Hertfordshire. Can't wait. Maybe not. Maybe not. I mean, I'll just stay here in Greenwich with my, my gals and have a nice time.
I've seen too many Johnsons. They never end happily.
Right, there is that. Yeah.
Oh no, not another Johnson.
Her job, she provided children. That's all she had to do. The rest of the time, she'd just do her own thing.
And James enjoyed pleasures elsewhere anyway, so I don't know what. Anyway, I just like this. I like what it doesn't include, and I love the fact that it just skims over things.
Yeah, come on. Do you want me to carry on?
Yes, go for it. Do you want to go to where did we get you? We got you to their arrival in London, didn't I? Actually?
Yeah.
Stop where you see fix. This is probably going to be a harder one to break. I think.
Okay. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the tide circling to go to London. These two royal kings, accompanied with the prince and honourable privy council, the lords and estates of the land, and a most worthy company of knights and esquires, the king's barges giving their attendance, their royal persons came abroad and were rowed towards London. By the way, as they passed, they were saluted by great peals of ordnance from the merchants' ships which rid in the Thames. The gunners of them so carefully applied their business that they were highly commended for their care, and their owners which were at charge thereof had thereby great commendations. With these delights and other musical noise of drums and trumpets, they passed on till they came to the Tower Wharf, where those most gracious kings and royal prince landed. There they made long stay, but as suddenly as the train could be marshalled according to their ancient manner, they stepped forwards, where the kings were entertained by that worthy magistrate, Sir Leonard Holiday, Lord Mayor of the Honourable City of London, who delivered the sword unto his highness, who graciously received it and then proceeded. I will pause there because I might come back to this at a later date, but just to say, suddenly as the train could be marshalled, they made no long stay at the Tower. There was a massive debate about where they would meet the mayor and his party by the Tower, and it was very fraught. So I think kind of Roberts is kind of alluding to that a little bit. It's kind of quite funny. There was a big issue about precedent and status, and because the Tower, of course, was a royal property. It wasn't part of the city. But they didn't want to meet him on the kind of little narrow street outside the town. They wanted to meet somewhere a bit more sort of splendid, and there wasn't anywhere. So that was kind of what happened behind all this. So anyway, I'll carry on. The marshals of the city first, who had with great care and deserved commendations for their travails, in the morning very carefully rid up and down the city, carefully overseeing the multitudes of people which came to be partakers of these royal sights. By the straight commandment received from the Lord Mayor and Aldermen for the people's safeties, that no harm may befall any of the companies, so highly and with such great regard that they applied themselves in placing and governing them, that thereby much harm was prevented, which might otherwise have happened by the unruly multitude, as is oftentimes seen in such times and places. The marshals had allowed their attendants 12 men suited in yellow fustian, with ash-coloured hats, red bands and red scarves, and each an upstaff in their hands. Aaron?
Yeah, go for it.
Next then, 2 trumpeters of His Majesty's, after which followed the knight marshals, men of His Highness' household, famous and most worthy knight Sir Thomas Vavasor. These his followers were all suited in clay-coloured cloaks, streamed with silver lace, white doublets and green hose, with white hats. The bands rolled white and green and guarded in the brim with green silk. Of this company were 23 persons. Then followed the messengers in their coats very richly embroidered, the number of 14, then a herald of arms. After whom followed his Majesty's trumpeters, led by their sergeant, in a cloak of carnation velvet, bearing the silver office mace of his office, and the rest of his company to the number of 14 in their livery coats, very rich and well mounted. Then follows the King of Denmark's drum, riding upon a horse, with 2 drums, one of each side the horse neck, whereupon he struck 2 little mallets of wood, a thing very admirable to the common sort and much admired.
Fabulous. Thank you, Tracy. I was really enjoying the description then.
I love this, the drummer with the 2 little drums and the horse's neck.
I was going.
Not a novelty.
I was going. Did we do a Lord Mayor's show for this guy? Oh yes, we did. See, I was thinking. I forgot which years we hadn't got there. I was going. Yes, we did meet this man. Available.
Yeah.
Available from a recording from much earlier. I mean, suddenly you can tell where this guy was really.
Yeah, I think he was there. Yeah. It kind of reminds me a bit of what's his name? The guy who witnessed James's royal entry. Wrote this really hilarious account of it. I can't remember his name, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I mean he's pretty much just an observer. But I do love the little drums on each with the 2 little mallets.
Oh, it's one of those little pieces of description you just think.
We have to do that at some point. We have to kind of somehow get a horse and 2 drums and 2 little mallets. It'd be really cool.
Yeah. But this is why these texts are so wonderful. You know, if you'd got the equivalent to the Lord Mayor's show pageant leaflets of this, you wouldn't have got that. Probably you'd have got the very stately description, but because it's somebody almost for those who didn't make it to the procession for King Christian, here's what you missed.
Yeah. You're on a horse with 2 little mallets. It was so cool.
I was wondering about the sword, because he says the Lord Mayor of the Honourable City of London, who delivered the sword unto his Highness.
It's a ceremonial sword.
Yeah, because I seem to remember that there's always the mace is usually the symbol of power. So they had both.
They had a sword bearer and a mace.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That explains it.
Which of course still exists.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm just sending you a picture of just that thing. And you
I was thinking, was it a gift but yeah, something.
Yeah, it's part of the paraphernalia. There you go.
Ooh.
So it's still a thing.
Yeah, understandably. It's just
of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, other cities have them, but come on.
I love his hat, I have to say.
Yeah. That's the cap of maintenance. It is made of squirrel fur.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Poor squirrel.
Oh no, not Paul Squirrel. No. Anyway.
I don't know. Well, it probably is still squirrel. What the hell? But yeah, this is. I mean, this guy he just loves costume, doesn't he? He really. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, it is the sort of L or hello of a royal pageant, royal entries, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's brilliant. Love it. And it's nice because you don't get it very often.
Right.
You might get the odd occasional hint, but not to this extent.
So, okay. So we are right in the thick of it now.
So we're still by the tower, are we? Do we think at this point?
Yeah, he doesn't give the route, but the other text that we're going to come back to does give the route, and it's basically the royal entry route. So they start at the tower, they go down Mark Lane onto Fenchurch Street, up Gracious Street, past Leadenhall, down Cornhill onto Poultry and Cheapside.
Mhm.
So it's exactly the same route as James would have taken 2 years previously.
And I'm sure that when Rob does the next one, he will probably have a very handy map.
Will have
He,
that,
he does. He has added this to the
That's
Lord
it.
Mayor description. Anyway,
I was just wondering, because in the next paragraph, and we've had it before, where there's discussion of a material called watch.
It's watch it.
Oh, watch.
It's watch
Okay.
it, which is a kind of a fairly robust kind of linen cotton fabric.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Now I know we're definitely in like sort of maybe like haberdasher or sort of that kind of costume territory.
Yeah, it's used in fabric for the Lord Mayor shows as well, for the costumes.
Yeah. Cool.
Eric, I'm going to get you to read from the Denmark King's Trumpeters, and I'm going to get you to go quite a way, actually. I'm going to get you to go to... I just decided that. Then came the most gracious Prince Henry.
Where's that? Oh, okay. Yeah, I can know that. Then followed the Denmark's king. Yeah. Then followed the Denmark King's Trumpeters, being 11 in all, decently attired after our English fashion in cloaks watched, guarded with black and striped white, blue velvet hose, and white satin downwards, trimmed with silver lace, white hats with bands embroidered with gold. With this company, the king's guard began to come forward, which marched soldier-like by the sides of the train for a time to keep the way. After them, more heralds in their rich coats than the king's gentlemen and courtiers, being most gallantly mounted in their and rich in their apparel. Then a troop of most gallant knights, of whose riches a number may admire, of whom many of them wore strange feathers of rich and grey esteem, which they called the birds of paradise. These, passing on, follow the knights of the Bath, are so richly garnished, both in apparel, rich jewels, with gallant horses, and costly furniture, that all the princes of the world may admire to hear thereof, but more to see the most exceeding richness and gallant personages of them. Then follow more heralds, the worshipful dean of his majesty's chapel, and one other with him. Then barons and the nobility of England, the younger sort, very rich and well attended upon, the masters of his honorable court of requests. Then sergeants at arms with their rich maces in number 9, and then the Reverend Lord Bishop of Canterbury, his Grace the Lord Bishop of London, and others. Then the Right Honourable Earl of Salisbury and other earls, both of the council and others, amongst whom were placed in great honor the lords and chiefest of the Denmark king's nobility in council, who wore the most part of them rich jewels on their left breasts, all men of great gravity and seemly personages. Then came the Right Honourable Earl of Nottingham, Lord High Admiral of England, who carried the sword, and between two, the Lord Mayor of London, who carried a mace. Then came the most gracious Prince Henry, whose sweet and most majestical grace and favor, the whole company with due honor to his grace did applaud and pray for his most gracious father and all theirs in all health to continue. Shall I keep going?
Go for the next paragraph and then stop, I think.
Then follow these two famous honors of estate and majesty, the two kings, our dread sovereign and his beloved brother Christian the fourth king of Denmark, who, regarding the true love of their nation than gorgeous apparel, whereof they have plenty, yet in their pleasures they contented themselves in plain suits to be attired, but rich in jewels, themselves not far unlike, and their horses near colored and suited.
Yeah, I love this description. And considering the size of some of these streets, really quite interesting. Having been down, well, not down these particular streets with Tracey, but having seen some of the streets in London they may have been down. This is quite impressive.
He does. Till it doesn't say where they are on the route till they get to Cheapside, which is annoying. So I guess he would probably just been in one particular location and just sort of like, you know, seeing everybody go past. But you note that it's in reverse order of precedence. So the kings come last. Wait for it, you know. So you knew exactly where you were in order of precedence by where you were on the procession.
Yes, it's a hell of a procession.
Yeah. And Henry's really important.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's so, you know, with hindsight, it's so sad to read that about Henry.
It's a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Continue. Well, he's got basically 6 years. So, yeah. Yeah. Oh well.
Well, that's it, isn't it? If you know, you know, when you look back at anything and know history, you go, oh no.
Yeah, pretty much. Wasn't there also like was he actually that well respected and loved by sort of people, or is it just like something that we're projecting onto history?
I think he was to an extent. Yeah, I mean, maybe not when he was that young. But yeah, he was. You know, there was much lamentations when he died.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I think. So yeah. He was 194, so he was, what's that, 12? Yeah, 12.
Yeah, he certainly lived long enough to be in the public imagination as king, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of portraits of him taken, and not just kind of neutral portraits of him sort of, you know, standing as the kind of the great Protestant hope of the nation. And obviously, as you get into the later into 17th century, things start to get really kind of difficult on the continent. Yeah. And yeah, so yeah.
Yes, I vaguely remember there was a brilliant exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery a few years ago about him. Sorry, but I remember we went to Montacute House in the summer, and there's 2 portraits, one of him and one of Charles, and I thought that was the first time since that exhibition I'd really seen portraits of him, and I was like, oh, yeah. Had to do a rapid history lesson to the other half, but yes. It's like, what?
You start actually, come on.
Yeah. Who's that?
Anyway, okay, all right, well, we're nearly on Cheapside.
We're nearly on territory I know well. I've lost track of who's next. Oh, Tracey, I think it's you. About whom down to the end of the train does marching, I think.
Yep. Okay. So this is the kings, about whom on sides marched something Denmark guards, suited in watchet coats, hose, soldier-like laced with white and something laces, whitish hats with blue badges and probably green halberds. These 2 most famous brother kings, riding in such love and in majesty so surpassing, did so joy the hearts of their subjects, and the whole world may admire. Yea, such was the honour of this day in London, and exceeding joy to behold these 2 famous kings in their unity, as will, while there be any being, never be raised out of memory. Whoa. These royal kings passed. After them followed the Right Honourable Earl of Worcester, one of his Privy Council and Master of the Horse. After whom followed His Majesty's gentlemen pensioners, who made a most honourable and great show, such was their riches both of men and horse, amongst all which in their rich surplices and feathers, which made a glorious show, was to be admired, which were thus suited, their feathers yellow and red, their scarves, I think it's scarves very large, laced with fair gold lace at each end. Next to them, the King of Denmark's guard marching 3 and 3 soldier-like, after whom came our gracious King's guard in their rich coats, to the number of 180 or thereabouts, lost track obviously, whose comely personages and seemliness and apparel does so amaze the mind of all strangers coming to this land, as they be admired at in all Christian kings' countries, their persons, civil government and kind entertainment of strangers. The train thus marching, as I've described, rid on till they came to Cheapside, all the way as these two famous kings passed from the Tower Hill to the companies of London in their liveries, gowns and hoods, for whom there was places double railed, which was hanged with blue broadcloth, and the rails garnished with ancients very richly gilt with the king's arms of England, the ancients of silk of each hall, with streamers and pendants their arms, and several fellowships, the better to be known. Windows and penthouses richly decked with arras and other costly hangings. So that's the bit I know about, because I've read lots and lots of material from the livery companies complaining about having to pay for these rails.
Oh, I can well imagine that. Yeah. Yes.
We've got to buy some rails, guys. Oh God, and broadcloths, yeah, and broadcloths, and new flags, yeah. Oh God, all right then, yeah.
Oh, the stuff they just don't tell you in the books. Again, really great descriptions. And of course, now we're in London, we can see, you can imagine where they are, and you can imagine what they're doing.
And also, you know, as you see with some of Decotexts, you know, lots of emphasis on the spectators as well. You know, in the windows, which they took the kind of glass out of the windows sometimes on Cheapside and some of the bigger houses. So it was a really good vantage point.
Yes. Yeah, okay, yeah, you can imagine people hanging out the windows in that sort of slightly dodgy Hollywood movie-esque moments.
Yeah.
Screaming joy and pleasure at the fact that they can actually see, probably, where the poor beggars below get stuck.
I see. I picture it kind of like, you know, the scene from Disney's Aladdin, where you've got, like, you know, Prince Ali making his entrance. Basically, Aladdin making his entrance as Prince Ali with, like, you know, flourishes and shenanigans and that kind of thing. But then I don't know if that's just me exaggerating. Obviously, there weren't elephants, but I mean, or, you know, emus and all the entire menagerie, whatever. But I mean, I'm imagining that that's the kind of spectacle that they were going for. Sort of just something very grand and like, look at us, we the English are, well, yeah, or Scottish.
Absolutely, you know, as long as there are people left in the world, no one's ever going to forget this. Yeah. He says.
No pressure. Yeah.
But it was printed, so not that they thought they'd last very long, probably, but yes.
I just find it interesting that, like, he doesn't name anybody aside from maybe, like, I mean, he goes, you know, Earl of Worcester or like Bishop of Rochester. These were people that everyone knew, or at least knew their names. Whereas for us, it's like, who's that during the time of James? Like, for us to, you know, at least for me, because I don't really have the context. But then
there would undoubtedly be a kind of an order of service which would have given you the, you know, who was in which, who was after whom, that kind of thing.
And the know-it-alls who stood there going, well, that's so-and-so. You can just imagine it, can't you? There's always one know-it-all who knows exactly who everyone is, or the town chronicle crier going, at so-and-so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric, I'm going to give you, can you read to the end?
I can do that.
There's a nice big chunk of description. I just can't see a break. So.
Wait, that's from With Great Admiration, like, okay. With great admiration past these famous kings till they came to Cheapside. 3 cheers for Cheapside. Just leaving a sound bite note here. Viewing the numbers of people which stood in windows, the streets, and other places, showing lovely and gracious expectance of their loves by their favorable countenance. In their passing at the great conduit in Cheapside was made with green boughs, a very artificial arbor, which was garnished with all sorts of delightful fruits. In this arbor was placed most sweet music, which greatly delighted the hearers, and no doubt pleased his majesty. At the little conduit, as they proceeded, there was erected a most stately pageant, such as for the rare device and beauty was, and is to be admired, and hath seldom been seen. a matter of such state and rare edifice in so short time to be accomplished, the workmen and plotters thereof having not had passed 12 days of respite after their first warning. Here, these most famous princes and most admired kings stayed, beholding the devices and rareness of the same, unto whom were delivered in the name of the Lord Mayor and his brethren the aldermen, which stood near them in their scarlet gowns, and all the commons of the city, a most pleasing speech, which ended the kings gave the city thanks, and proceeded till they came to Paul's churchyard, whereat the school of the worshipful company of mercers, called Paul's School, there were other delightful speeches delivered, to which they graciously hearkened and honorably accepted. Then rode they on without stay to Fleet Conduit, which was garnished sweetly. On the top was placed a delightful music, and were presented with other speeches, which was graciously accepted. When they came to St. Dunstan's church, they were presented with a noise of cornets, which showed their cunning to be excellent and very pleasing to both their majesties. Here hence they proceeded to Temple Bar, where his majesty and his brother king, having many thanks to the lords mayor and citizens for their great charge and pains, delivered the swords to the lord mayor, rode on their way to Somerset House, where they reposed themselves that night, and to their gracious spread their pleasures. The Lord Mayor returning was met by the sheriffs and aldermen of the city, who accompanied him to his house. Thus finished this day's work, to God's glory, their highest great light, which the omnipotent giver of all grace and preserver of his ever increase, and protect them and all their royal progeny from all detestable practices in this world, and in the last, heaven be their inheritance. Amen. Amen. Goodness.
I could just see that procession of where they are because of the landmarks. That's fabulous. Where did we do? Where was ZMS 2021? Was it the Little or the Great Conduit?
It was near. It was near the where the cross and the standard were, but it was nearer to the Great Conduit than the Little Conduit. Little Conduit is up near St Paul's.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to. I was literally going. It's one of those two.
Yeah.
But again, that little, and I think you've said we've got the text for some of this.
We need to with the Little Conduit one, because he basically doesn't tell us anything about it at all.
No.
Except that they did it in a very short period of time, and it was rather nice.
12 days sounds very realistic for theatre.
But it gives the hint of what happened, and I love the fact that he literally drops them off at Somerset House.
Yeah, because the speech at Fleet Conduit, I think, was the Recorder of London, and that was the one that was in Latin, and the text has survived of that one. But yeah, I'm getting more and more of a kind of second-hand, or if not third-hand, vibe from this text, I have to say.
Yeah, he can't have moved that fast. He didn't have his little Vespa that got him around the back streets to get from side to side, did he? Come on, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Sorry. You know what I mean. He never got there. But so many of these places still exist in some way, shape, or form. You just, for anybody who knows London, or has at least been to London, Temple Bar, very much not in the same place, but still in existence.
Interestingly, Temple Bar, when it was taken away from the city, whenever that was, the 19th century, I think, it ended up in Tilbury-Hope.
Did it? Yeah. Of course it did.
It brought back to the city.
Yes.
20 years ago.
Do you know what? It didn't even occur to me that's where it ended up.
Yeah, it's just a coincidence, actually, but yeah, it's a nice one, isn't it?
We came full circle.
Yeah.
Kind of.
I mean, there's a bit more detail here of what happens at the kind of post St Paul's stretch, which is kind of interesting, because usually you get something at Fleet Conduit and then maybe at Temple Bar, but there's also something at St Dunstan in the west. So there's a bit more information there, data, as Rob would say. I mean, it's reminds me a bit also of the music they played for the Royal Entry at Poultry by St Mildred's Church, which was basically a Danish march, which was there to honour Anna. Well, I don't imagine she was very interested, but there's some Danish music, and it may well have been something similar happening here.
Amazing.
Right. But yeah, the other text has actually got some of the songs and sort of verses, so we'll get more of a sense of it in due course.
Watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space. I mean, it's like, it's a few days worth of stuff.
Sorry.
I don't play it, but I'm knackered.
I love this because so often you only get one text of something like this, and to actually have to know that we're going to start to piece together as a group this pageant, this amazing, because we've also got the stuff at some of the stuff at Tilbury-Hope and
and I've got obviously lots of stuff from the city companies about what they had to do.
Yeah, of course. How dare he ask for like a sort of scarlet?
It'll flesh it out, really, So that would be cool. I don't think any of the other texts give quite the level of attention to the costuming and the colour and the fabrics and so on. It's really quite something, actually.
No, it's been glorious. Any further thoughts?
Very interesting.
Sorry. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been one of those. I'm always happy, but however much text we get of these things, but I love the fact that there's more to come for this. I'm dying to find out more. And
we'll have to see what it does. I think if Rob wants to kind of go back to it and spend more time on it, and I kind of hope he does, but we'll see.
Rob, if you're listening,
do a little thing. Shall we just?
Rob, we're going to do it over the summer if you don't. Sorry. And as I say to people who are listening in the future, there are many more examples of this sort of civic pageantry available on the Beyond Shakespeare YouTube channel. We've done all the Lord Mayor's shows. We've done some royal entries. We've talked about all sorts of things. With people such as Eric, myself, and Tracey, and many more of our talented group. Also look out for the plays. There are some quite fabulous texts coming up, and other interesting texts this period.
Having said all this, I don't think we'd probably try to restage like this, because the budget would be ridiculous.
Oh, no,
but horses with little mallets.
We've watched this space, but we're hoping to do something rather different this coming autumn. So yeah.
Right. Yes, if you would like to support the work of Rob and this incredible group, then please look at Patreon and something called Coffee Store or something. I can't remember what it's called.
Coffee.
Anyway, Rob, come back, all is forgiven, is my final word. And thank you. Thank you to Tracey. Thank you to Eric. And thank you to Rob, as ever. Bye.
Bye.